Welcome back to the Obvious Choice podcast. I am here again, as always, with Amber and with Reginald Ronald Rensell III. How you doing, guys?
Hello.
Remember the show Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Of course.
Did you ever watch that, right?
Of
So at
course
the
I do.
beginning where they introduced everybody and they always had this weird intro and funny faces that they do.
I don't remember that part of it, but I do remember it being the best show on TV for its entire run.
100%.
It's pretty much the best thing ever.
Today we're talking about books, particularly book publishing. So this is specifically for you if you have published a book, if you want to write a book, if you think that there might be something in your future that has to do with books. This is for you. If not, pop off, go listen to another episode. We'll see you later. Let me start at the end first, because I'm going to get very, very detailed and very tactical, and actually going to break down the numbers and percentages pretty clearly here in a way that I wish that people did for me when I started publishing. So let me start at the end. After selling close to 200,000 self-published books, I've now decided to traditionally publish, and I'll likely never self-publish again. Now, there are a whole ton of corollaries to that, and the reason why, but this flies in the face of a lot of what's going on right now, which is saying you should self-publish, the publishers don't add any value. Now that I've worked with a traditional publisher in the way that I've worked with them, I actually think that's wrong. And I think that a lot of the arguments towards self-publishing are somewhat flawed with a whole whack of caveats. And so I'm going to talk about all of that. I'm going to talk about when you should potentially self-publish, conventionally published. For context, I've sold books basically every way you could sell books. I've sold them conventional self-publishing fulfilled through Amazon, what's called print on demand or KDP Select, which basically means you self-publish a book, it gets up on Amazon worldwide, somebody orders it, a copy is printed out by Amazon and sent to them, it's hands off. I have sold books in bulk to conferences, gym owners, everywhere, anything from 10 to 500 plus at a time. I've licensed my books to other programs. And so, for example, one of the most prominent certifications in India uses Ignite the Fire as their one of their texts. I have done CEO branded books where companies have purchased 5,000 plus copies at once. We had a ghostwriter do a custom forward from that CEO based off of a series of interviews. We then printed 5,000 copies of the book. They bought them, and then they distributed them to their audience. For example, Girls Gone Strong did this, where Molly did a custom forward. I've done free plus shipping, which is a very common promotion if you're in the ClickFunnels ecosystem, and realized that just how much Russell Brunson has lied about the realities of that model. Whole different conversation. But we move tens of thousands of copies using free plus shipping, which basically means that you use the book at the start, at the top end of a funnel. Usually it's paid ads. It's always paid ads if you want to scale it. And what happens is we print the books, we self-fulfill it. So we printed it out with a series of different printers across Canada and the United States. We fulfilled them. And then we ran ads to say, hey, you get this book for free. All you got to do is pay for shipping. On that same page, there's an upsell, usually some digital program that you try to get about a 10 to 20% take rate. The idea is that the shipping of the book and the upsell will account for your ad spend. And then you have people into a nurture funnel where you try to bring them down the funnel and sell them a more expensive thing. With us, it was the Online Trainer Academy. It kind of worked. It kind of didn't work. Moved tens of thousands of copies of the books. I'm saying all of this to tell you that I've basically done it all. And I have done it all in reasonably big ways where I've gained an awareness of what works and what doesn't work. And so I'm excited to talk to you about that. So the first question that people always ask me, and part of why I'm recording this is that I get asked a lot of questions now on book stuff, and I kind of don't want to repeat myself over and over again. So I'm kind of doing this podcast so I can just send it to them. So this is the most selfish recording ever. Thank you, Amber, for being a part. I mean, why would you answer the same question? I had somebody ask me in my Instagram DMs today, he's curious about starting a certification program for aerial, I guess, fitness, something aerial fitness. And super cool. Great. I hope he does well with it. He asked me if I had any advice for somebody starting a certification program. And I was like, yeah, of course I have advice. It's been like my life for the last decade. But I don't know what you've done. I don't know what you know. I don't know what you don't know. For me to figure out those things and give you good advice is going to take me a lot of time. Fortunately, a number of years back, I hosted a call with a couple people. One of them was doing accessible fitness, so for people disabled. Another one was doing an S&C certification. And I just recorded it. And that way I just sent him the recording and basically said, listen to this first. And then if you have any questions after you've listened to that, ask me. There's an author that I always laugh because he posts all these conversations all the time. Ramit Sethi. He always posts like people who ask questions to him. They're like, hey, so I just got your book and I've started reading it and I have this question. And his response is always, finish the book. Your question will be answered on page 187.
Infuriate me.
So that's part of why I'm doing this.
It's the only right answer.
Well, so one of the first questions that I often get is, you self-publish for so long, the money is so good with self-publishing, if you can sell books. Why are you conventionally publishing? Why are you right? Sure. Why are you traditionally publishing? And that's not a decision that I took lightly. The Obvious Choice is traditionally published by HarperCollins. I've already signed a deal for the next book with HarperCollins as well. And in doing that, I had to get an agent and have a proposal written, which I wrote and the agent helped a lot with. And it was a big process. And so in deciding whether to self-publish or traditionally publish, the first thing that I did was I looked around, because you can listen to podcasts, you can listen to yahoos all over the social media, and some of them might be legitimate, some of them might be complete yahoos, some of them might be 22-year-old copywriters who don't know shit about fuck. You don't know which one is which. And what I do is I try to cheat the system, and I'm like, well, how about I just look for evidence in the real world from people who have a proven track record? Like, I don't need them to tell me what I should do. What I should do is I should watch what they do and try to at least make some conclusions based off of that. And so I started to look around at the people who I really admire in this field. And that's what I suggest you do. The people who you connect with, the people who you admire, the people who have been legitimately successful for an extended period of time. Now, Ray Dalio of Bridgewater, one of the best investors of all time, in his book Principles, gives the very, very astute advice, which is reliability of information cannot be discerned by one data point. Somebody who's had something good happen for them once means absolutely nothing. In order to assume reliability, that they know something worth knowing, there must be repeatability in their success. Somebody who's had one book, for example, that's been successful, great, they might know a lot. I don't know for sure whether they know anything worth knowing. Somebody who has published multiple books, doesn't mean that all of them have been successful, but that has built a great career and reputation over a matter of a number of years. And they have repeatability in that. I can look at them and say, they probably know something that I don't. Or they might just have something worth knowing. And so those were the people that I looked towards. I'll give you an example of two of them, right? Ryan Holiday versus James Clear. James Clear has published one book. Now, it has blown the roofs off and been unbelievably successful and amazing. Congratulations. Holy shit. Dude's made like over $100 million on that book. You do the math. My guess is he's taking home $30 to $40 million a year on that book and stuff kicking off from it. Crazy. But it's only one. Now, until he proves to me that he can repeat that success, I take his advice about book publishing and book writing with a grain of salt. Obviously, he knows what he's doing, but I take it with a grain of salt. That's all I'm saying. And then you have somebody like Ryan Holiday, who has clearly and consistently published books well in an escalating fashion for a long time. So I look to people like Ryan to follow. And he's not the only one. But what I discovered very, very quickly is that every single one of them traditionally publishes and continues to traditionally publish even after they've built their own platform, even after they've learned the rules of the road and had multiple experiences. Ryan literally ran a book marketing agency for a very, very long time. There are very few people in this world, I think, that would be more qualified to self-publish and market and sell his own books than him. And yet, he traditionally publishes. So that's a very interesting data point, because that seems to fly in the face of what you advised, right? If you have your own platform, if you can sell your own books, well, why wouldn't you self-publish? The money is better. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then I started asking people who are outside of my network that I wouldn't otherwise talk to, or that might have differing opinions to mine. And one of them is Jason Pfeiffer, who we mentioned on this podcast a few times. And I called him one day, and I basically said, I'm considering going with this agent. Reviews look great. I've spoken to a bunch of her past clients. What do you think I should do? Like self-publish, like traditionally publish? And what he said to me, I'll never forget. He said, John, I know that you can write a book. I know that you can sell a book. I know that you can market a book. And the book will be good. He goes, from my standpoint, in the legacy media, this guy is the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. He goes, from my position in the legacy media, I don't even look at self-published books. He says, it's not that I don't think that there are self-published books that are very, very good. It's that the majority of them aren't. And as a result, because I get so many books and so much stuff across my desk, I have to create a very quick, superficial filter with what I look at and what I don't look at. And if something comes to me from a big 6 or a big 5 publisher, it's going to go in the pile where I'm going to glance at it. Now, a book that's already been absurdly successful that comes across his desk, he might look at. But what I realized is that there are actually a whole bunch of situations like this where when you self-publish, you just need to catch up. It's just harder because you don't have that stamp of approval. And this is what I said to the publishers when I was interviewing for them. And when you made a comment back in the day on the podcast about this with record labels as well. They asked me, the publishers, when I was interviewing for them, that were going to bid on my book, they said, why are you talking to us? Why aren't you self-publishing this? And I said a few things, but my main note to them was the world that we're living in is becoming increasingly decentralized. In a decentralized economy, where anybody can say anything and produce anything, it is increasingly more difficult for the consumer quickly to figure out whether they can trust something or not, whether it's worth taking a second look. And so, in the last 10 years or 15 years, where the gatekeeper was removed, I think that was wonderful because it gave everybody an opportunity. I actually foresee us moving back into a world where the gatekeepers hold a lot more value, because we just don't know. I mean, I'm even at the point now where I get a self-published book and I don't even look at it. Like a friend sends it to me, because you know what? Almost all of them are just really, really shit. And it's not to say that the person is shit. It's not to say that the information is shit. It doesn't have that fine-tuning stamp of approval. I'll tell you a story from my own book that I think illustrates this. There is a section in the book where the section is actually about communication, and it's about marketing communication. And I use what I call the bed of nails paradox. And what I mean by that is when you market, you actually want to pick your one nail. You want to pick your one thing that you communicate. The more things you talk about, the less impact all of those things have. And the nail that you choose doesn't necessarily need to be something that is new or innovative or even unique to you. You just have to identify something that was already there that's perhaps marketable, or speak about it in a new way. And so I give the example of Bulletproof Coffee to illustrate this. This isn't me saying that I like the company or that I like the coffee, or it's in no way promoting them. I'm just using them as an example to illustrate this. When Bulletproof Coffee came out, they promoted themselves as a coffee that removed what's called mycotoxins out of the coffee. Now, mycotoxins are a fungi that are really, really nasty. There's all of this research that showed this stuff was really, really nasty, and it's very clearly in coffee production. Very clearly in coffee production. So they blasted off the rooftops. They found all these studies saying how scary this stuff was. It leads to cancer, and all of that was true. What's also true, what they neglected to mention, is that all manufacturing processes in all developed world coffee for the last 50 years has removed mycotoxins. You probably have never drank coffee in your life that's had more than just completely safe trace elements of this stuff. And what Bulletproof identified correctly was that there was marketability in what everybody in their industry already knew to be true and so didn't mention, but the general consumer didn't. Okay, so I tell that example. Copy editing comes through. Book is done, right? Copy editing comes through. And they challenge me on that example. Now, this is a very minor example to illustrate a point in a section. It's not central to anything, right? Copy editing comes through and legal comes through, and it says, hey, I don't know if we can tell this story. I went to the Bulletproof Coffee website, and they don't make that claim. And I said, they sure as hell did. I haven't checked for a while, but they sure as hell made that claim, and it was central to their marketing. So I went on the Wayback Machine, Internet Archive, and I found the original landing page that Bulletproof had for Bulletproof Coffee. I can't remember what year it was from. And no shit, they make that claim. So I sent the legal team this page. And I said, they don't make that claim anymore, but when the coffee first came out, they absolutely did. Here's the page from the Internet Archive. And they said, great, you're good. Thank you so much. My point in illustrating this is I can say whatever the fuck I want when I self-publish a book. And nobody's going to fact check it, and nobody's going to challenge it. I can't even make an obscure claim that doesn't speak negatively about anybody to illustrate a different point in a book that's published by HarperCollins. That's why you can trust books traditionally published by notable publishers. That's why you can't trust self-published books. It's a serious problem. The other part that I realized is that it is very slow to traditionally publish a book, which is not a bug. I think it's a feature. It forced me to slow down a lot. It's forced me to have big waiting times in between each draft and manuscript to get in feedback. I think that that's good. And then, of course, there's better printing, there's better warehousing, distribution. Like, I don't even have to think about it. I can self-publish a book. I can self-publish a book, and I can print my own copies of that book. I can do it through Amazon. I can hire interior designers. I can hire editors. I can hire cover designers. And I can hire people who have worked or still do work for these big publishing houses, like arguably as good as the skill that I would otherwise get from the big publishing house. The difference is twofold. Number one, I'd have to pay up front for them. Number two, I'd have to manage them, which means my job would now effectively become project management of a book business. Instead of, hey, I'm writing a book and making it the best possible book I can possibly write. And as a result now, in between the Obvious Choice coming out, between now and January 14th, I will probably most likely have written the first draft of my next book. And I've already had the proposal accepted for the next book and earned the first third of my royalty, of my advance on the next book. So let's break down the numbers a little bit, because this has to do with the money. And I'm going to tell you when you should self-publish, because to be honest, most people should probably start self-publishing. I'm telling you all of the reasons why traditionally publishing, I think, gets a bad rap unjustifiably. But I still think most people should self-publish. And I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But let's break down the numbers first. So when you self-publish a book, you get 60% of the list price as your royalty. Amazon gets 40%. This is just selling through Amazon. If you self-print it and self-fulfill it, it's much more complicated, and it depends on where you're shipping it to and all this stuff. But you get 60%. When I conventionally publish a book, the hardcover royalty is about 15% on the high end. So I negotiated to get 15% on day one. Most people actually get 7.5% at first, and then as they sell more books, they escalate up to 15%. So 15%, call it royalty. Okay, so that's a big difference, right? On a $20 book or on a $30 book, 60% versus 15% is a big difference. But it's not actually 60%, because what it is it's the list price minus the cost for Amazon to print the book. And then it's 60% of that. So if the list price, for example, my cost to print like Ignite the Fire is about $5.50. So if my list price is $23, I actually only get 60% of about $17.50. Which means that my royalty is not 60%, it's actually closer to 47, 48%. So now you have a tighter gap, right? It's like 15 versus, call it 50%, probably closer to 45. But then you have to add in, when you traditionally publish a book, you get money up front as an advance, and it doesn't cost anything on my end to produce the book. When I self-publish a book, I have to pay for everything, and I get no money up front. You can self-publish a book very, very cheaply. If you want to do a good job, it will cost you $50,000 to $100,000. If you want to do a great job, it will cost you $100,000 to $300,000. My guess is that HarperCollins has spent an additional $75,000 to $100,000 on my book, from design to legal to editing to copy editing. And then, of course, they're going to be printing and distributing them. They have sales teams going out to all the bookstores and talking to the bookstores. They've got a marketing and PR team. Now, I don't know how good of a job they do. My point is, I'm getting a 15% royalty where I'd otherwise get a 45, 50% royalty. But I'm also getting 6 figures plus up front. I'm not telling you what my advance is, but 6 figures plus up front. In addition, I now have the space to write and propose and get accepted a second book before the first has come out, which means I get the advance now, or the first part of the advance, for the next book as well. So I have all this cash in hand, as opposed to putting out all of that cash, having the process take much more of my time and energy, meaning that there's no way I would have been able to start another book by now. And then I'd have to start again anew afterwards. That gap starts to tighten really, really quickly financially. And that's why I think that the vast, vast, vast majority of really successful authors, even if they have their own platform, even if they're exceptional marketers, continue to publish traditionally. I don't think there's any other option, because I think they understand that the value that's provided enables them to sell a lot more books. Now, I mean, you do have examples like David Goggins, right? There are outliers examples. David Goggins self-published a book, and his whatever his book is called, I haven't read it. I don't know. He's not. Yeah, I get him, but he's not for me. But he self-published. What is it? Can't Hurt Me, and he sold like 5-10 million copies, right? So he's probably made $100 million on that book. But probably closer to 60 to 70. But that is like about as extreme of an outlier as you can possibly get. And he also worked with oh God, what's their name? There was Book in the Box. Tucker and Zach started it. I can't remember what it's called, but he worked for a company where he paid like 10, 15,000 bucks is my guess. 20, 25,000. I don't know what. When he worked with them, their prices went up to basically interview and write the book on his behalf and print it and publish it. So he kind of had like a hybrid publisher. But he still would have put out, my guess is $20,000 to $40,000 on that book upfront. Okay. I want to talk about why you should self-publish first. Len, Amber, do you have any questions on any of that stuff, though? I know this isn't something that either of you have done, or we haven't spoken about either of you have an interest in doing, but maybe you do.
One day that would be nice.
Yeah, I can't say that I have questions, but as you're talking about the cognitive load that's
the huge part.
That's removed by having someone else publish for you. I think about it in terms of music because that's a business that I understand because I tried to get in it for so long. And so often you hear about the sophomore jinx of an artist, right?
Yes.
Their first album was great. What are they going to do their second? And a lot of the times you don't get a great second album from someone because of that cognitive load. They get into the place where they produced an album, and now they're worried about tour dates.
Yes.
And now they're worried about copyright. And now they're worried about streaming contracts.
Yes.
And it takes away from the ability to be able to create more art. Most artists aren't good at art and business at the same time. And even though they are, can't deny the cognitive load of trying to self-produce the art through your own business acumen. And I think it's just a brilliant understanding that people don't have, that if you have business people who can do the business stuff, you can fully concentrate on the artistic rendering. And it can push your career forward, even though you're exchanging a little bit of income for it. It's probably a better long-term play.
And at the end of the day, the odds that your first book or that any one book is going to be blow the roofs off successful in Atomic Habits, the odds that are going to happen, even if you hit it right, even if you hit everything right. I mean, how many people who write a book that sells 1 million copies ever write another book that sells anywhere close to that? It almost never happens. Morgan Housel's a good example of that. His first book, Psychology of Money, has sold 6-7 million copies. His second book, Same as Ever, I don't know how many copies it sold. I mean, it sold a lot because people were such big fans of the first. But my guess is it hasn't sold more than a few 100,000. It probably never will. I mean, it'll piggyback off the first for a while. It was inarguably not as good of a book. I still think a good book, but inarguably not as good of a book. Now, he did conventionally publish, but my point he did traditionally publish, but my point in pointing that out is that, to what you said, Ren, it's just really hard to repeat it. And so the way to have the biggest reliability of success in any creative endeavor is to stack work on top of one another, because that work over the years compounds. It's not any one thing that you do. The best way to sell a book is actually to write another book. Michael Easter is a good example of that. He wrote Comfort Crisis. Phenomenal book. Phenomenal book. You know, he was a magazine journalist guy, very, very successful there with Men's Health, with Esquire, with that type of journalist. Comfort Crisis was his first book. And it was his first book. And so, you know, it did well for a first book. But then he came out with his second book, Scarcity Brain. And his second book was very, very good. But a lot of people who were fans of his first book started jumping on his second book and promoting it. And what happened? His first book outsells his second one now. Comfort Crisis, when Scarcity Brain came out and was on the New York Times bestseller list, Comfort Crisis was outselling it. It completely went along for the ride. The best way to sell a book is actually to write another book. Your back catalog is going to really feed you. The better you can stack your work atop of one another, the more successful you're going to be. And this goes into this next conversation of self-publishing versus traditional publishing. Because if you have a back catalog of self-published books that earn you a lot of dollars per book sold, and then you go and traditionally publish for the next phase of your career, your back catalog of books is going to go along for the ride. Mark Manson's a good example of this. He was actually in the dating niche for a lot of years. And so he's famous, of course, for Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and then he wrote another one, and then he wrote Will Smith's book along with Will. But he actually has, I think it's called Models. He has a book on dating that's self-published. And if you look at his book on Amazon on dating, it is like 9,000 reviews now. It's probably sold hundreds of thousands of copies. The dude probably makes $15 a copy on that book. I don't actually know what the list price is. I can tell you almost exactly what he makes on it. But the dude probably makes $10 or $15 a copy on that. He's probably made $5 to $10 million on his back catalog of self-published books simply by virtue of then having a traditionally published book that did really well. His self-published book on Amazon was basically dead weight on Amazon beforehand. So let's go to the question that I always get, which is how do you start? If you want to traditionally publish, how do you start? And my answer is the same for, if you're a single guy, how do you get a great woman? And the answer is you become the person who deserves one. You become the person who deserves one. You don't get a great literary agent in nonfiction. In fiction, maybe, I don't know that world as much. But in nonfiction, you don't get a literary agent who's great and well-connected and in demand by sending out pitches to them, no matter how good those pitches are. But their job, their career, their joy is solely dependent on them discovering phenomenal talent. In order for them to discover phenomenal talent, you have to demonstrate your phenomenal talent. This can happen one of a number of ways. This can happen by you going viral and doing something very, very interesting. This can happen by you building up a big platform, conventional, although less so now because publishers have gotten burned by social media influencers so many times that, somebody who entertains on social media generally can't sell that many books. They don't have staying power, and most of the books that they write are so shit that consumers turn off from them quickly. And so you kind of have to have something else, I'm told. It didn't used to be that way, but you kind of have to have something else now. But the best way to become the person who deserves a great agent is to self-publish books successfully. The best way to start a career writing books is to write fucking books. Shouldn't be a surprise. Write books. You got to find your own audience for those books. You've got to build the platform that's going to sell the books. And you've got to network with other authors. And then you say to those other authors, eventually, hey, I've had the success. I'm thinking about traditionally publishing for the next book. Do you have an introduction to an agent? So before I found the agent for The Obvious Choice, I was introduced to a few agents who I had conversations with, and none of them were the right fit. Some of them said no to me. I said no to them. We just didn't see eye to eye. Right? And to be fair to them, the vision for The Obvious Choice book was not what it became. It didn't have the scope. The writing wasn't as good. The ideas weren't as well worked out. And so I probably would have turned down the book anyway. But then I went and spoke. And when I know you're doing a lot of work polishing up your speaking, then I went and spoke at a conference. And somebody told me at that conference, they said, hey, there's a literary agent here. She said she wants to meet you. Right. So I don't think she came just to see me, but she came to see a few people because, again, it's their job to go to events like this to scope out people who are diamonds in the rough. And oftentimes, when you speak at events, or if there are events that you're at, there's often literary agents there. They just don't make themselves known. Right? So on stage, I let slip that I was working on a new book, finally, after many years, and I was thinking of traditionally publishing it and finding an agent. Well, who the hell do you think stopped me in the hall 5 minutes after my talk? And we had a conversation and hit it off. So that's how I found my agent. I never pitched anybody. But because I had this history of self-publishing books, she was able to very easily sell me to publishers. And she was also interested in me because I had already proven that I could sell books, right? And so, like finding a good woman, you gotta become the type of person who deserves one. I don't have any like sage advice, right? It's supposed to be hard. There's a reason why in this world of self-publishing and everybody having a media kit in their back pocket, there's a reason why we admire things with those labels so much still. Ren still laughs at me because my mother-in-law, when I sent in our family chat that I signed with HarperCollins, I announced in our family chat soon after it happened, well before I announced it like publicly. And my mother-in-law responded back, "Oh, that's so wonderful. We finally have an author in the family." This is going to be my 12th book.
It's about time, John.
This is going to be my 12th book.
Way to go, buddy.
12 books. And it will be 13 years and 10 months. Because Ignite the Fire came out in March. Actually, Ignite the Fire came out in March 2011. This book, Obvious Choice, will come out January 2024. Almost a full 13 years and 12 books later of showing up and self-publishing my own work and building an audience around it. And what that is, yes, showcasing that I can do the thing, of course, showcasing that I'm committed to the thing for sure, but also it's just putting in the reps, man. How do you get good at something? You do it a lot. You do it a lot. And then, of course, the other really nice thing is that if you have self-published books, digital programs, things like that you've created already that you've self-published, and then you go and traditional publish, it will feed all your other stuff, assuming that you do a good job. I have found that success in this world does not happen 1% at a time. I have found that success actually takes place in quantum leaps. You reset your baseline. You make your ceilings your new basements. The 1% better, the daily stuff, the flossing your teeth, the writing 500 words, all that shit, that's putting in the reps, preparing you to do something that is meaningful, to work on a big project. And you don't know which of those big projects is going to take. 12 books. Most people only even know that I ever wrote one of them. That's fine. One of them has given me a pretty damn good career. Right? But as you keep going, what I found is that the in-between work prepares you for the big thing. Most people never do the big thing. Most people never focus. Most people are so caught up in the day-to-day nonsense that really doesn't matter at the end of the day. Trying to get 1% better. 1% better is good for fucking flossing your teeth. It's not good for transformational change. Transformational change needs aggressive, unbalanced focus for short, contained periods of time. Now, you can only do that if you've put in those daily habits all throughout. But you got to have something you're working towards. And then what you're working towards, if that hits, if the obvious choice hits, if it takes off. I mean, I said to Allison straight up, I don't know whether this will happen or not. I hope that it'll happen. I'm hope that it'll happen. I'm nervous if it does happen. I looked at her one day. I think it was after I got one of the final drafts back. And I just said, this is fucking good. This is the potential to change a lot of things. And I don't quite know what to do with that. And I don't quite know how I'm going to manage that, if that happens. Now, that would be wonderful, right? And I don't know whether it will or not. I'm obviously biased. But when you take a big shot at something, and you've been putting in the work for all of the years that have prepared you for that shot, and that thing hits, it catapults you to a new level from which you will never fall off unless you really, really fuck up. Unless you really screw up. Like serious reputational damage stuff. Which, I mean, nobody listening to this should be doing any of that. You live with it for the rest of your life. It's positive, right? And then it feeds everything you've done in the past. So the message here is self-publish first. Publish yourself. What does James Altucher say? Choose yourself. Nobody's going to choose you unless you become the person who deserves to be chosen. But when you do that, what you will find is that all of the work that you've done in the past prepares you for a big leap forward and then feeds that stuff in the past. So self-publishing first, 100%. But I think traditionally published later is good. And the way that I heard it said the other day, I think is a good litmus test, which is you only work with a traditional publisher if they're going to give you a minimum $100,000 book deal. And the reason for that is that signifies to you that they have skin in the game, and that they're going to put effort into you and put some of their best people into your work. If you're not getting that much, it's probably better to self-publish because the money isn't going to be meaningful enough for you to make a big change, and it's not meaningful enough for them as an investment, most likely, to put their all into it. So you'd be better off kind of building your own team. Yeah. What do you guys think?
I like the idea of using self-publishing first. I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's a really good like connection for our listeners, and I can't quite put my finger on it right now, like in other spaces.
Okay.
Where it would be good. But doing those awkward, imperfect things first, and then kind of building that skill set and then going for the big thing is good, and then letting it feed in. So yeah, I like that idea a lot. I wish I could put my finger on.
Well, you hit on something there too, which is there's a lot of pressure traditionally publishing. Like there's a lot of pressure from me on me to deliver. And if the book doesn't perform well, it could seriously hurt my chances at developing my career as an author. Now, a little bit less so with the next book deal signed. You know, it's actually very, very rare that a first-time author will sign a big book deal for their next book before the first book has come out. Because, I mean, the publisher has already put out a lot of money into me and invested into me. They don't yet know whether I have sold books. Right. So often what they want to see is They want to see whether the book actually sells. And so what that says to me is they got the manuscript and they were like, we're impressed and we're not losing this guy. So that was a big vote of confidence that they came back as aggressive as they did right away for the next book, because it's not common at all for that to happen. But I think, to your point, Amber, perhaps this is some, tough love. A lot of people, when they start writing books, are not very good at writing books. This is Obvious Choice is book 13 for me. Like,
lucky number 13.
God damn. Oh no, book 12. Sorry, book 12. God, I don't even know. It's book 12 for me.
You're working on 13 too.
Well, yeah, I'll start. It's book 12.
Well, it's good proof of concept, right? Like, a lot of people want to do the big thing first, right? They want to build the big course, the membership site, whatever, all that stuff first, but you need a proof of concept. So if you want to prove to yourself that you can do it, like I remember when I first started personal training, I didn't do a normal certification. I did a freebie certification to prove to myself that I could stick to it first before paying for a proper certification.
Right.
And so to me, this is kind of like that. Like, make sure that you're going to stick it out.
Make sure you like it.
Put in the effort.
Because
exactly.
Once you get blacklisted, like if you say you're going to deliver on a book and you don't deliver on it, or you deliver like a really bad product, like, you're blacklisted. Like, the publishing industry is small. They'll look you up in the whatever it is, Publishers Weekly or whatever, the like publishing agency like department, because any book deal that's signed goes live in there, right? So they'll look up the history of it and they'll say, oh, they had actually signed a book deal with these guys over there, and they'll call up their buddy who they used to work with, who works for that company, and they'll say, hey, what happened with that kid? What happened with that guy? What happened with that girl? What happened with they, whatever your pronouns are? What happened with them? And they'll say, oh yeah, man, they just didn't deliver. Yeah, they backed out. They're like, all right, well, we're not working with them. Like, you get blackballed. So you kind of want to be ready for the shot.
The amount of work.
What's the Eminem song, man? You only get one shot. One.
You get one, John. And Mom made spaghetti also. That's all I know.
Speaking of Mom making spaghetti, I'm going to recommend another episode. And we're going to get out of here because that has to do with spaghetti. Check out episode 237. This is Create Seasons to Get More Out of Life. That I'm starting to share more of kind of the philosophy and the theory of what's going to go into the next book after Obvious Choice. It's really like self-development. It's really a lot of how I've figured out how to live my life over the last number of years, because in addition to writing a bunch of books and stuff, one of the things that I've done that I don't talk about that much is I've actually lived abroad for 4 to 6 months every year for the last 12 years. And I've been searching. I've been searching for the right way for me to live, for the right way for my family to live, for the right way for me to work. And it really has been a search for, I mean, this is so trite to say it this way, but I don't have better words. It's really been a search for figuring out what is enough and finding happiness. I grew up in a very traditional type household where my father was an engineer turned middle manager. My mom was a teacher. My sister's a lawyer. My brother's a teacher. My other brother is a small business banker. All of my friends are lawyers, doctors, dentists, teachers, accountants. And I always knew that those paths weren't right for me, but I didn't really know anybody else who had any other path that could be right for me. And so I kind of just set out on a search in 2013. And I figured out some pretty cool shit that really works for me. And I start talking about it in that episode a bit. So episode 237, Creating Seasons to Get More Out of Life. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening. Hope that this helps kind of think through the decision of how to begin the process of writing books and becoming an author. And it's not the type of thing that's going to make you rich overnight, but it will make you incredibly fulfilled. If my experience has been, it's proven witness, it's filled with purpose. It's challenging. It's It's fun. And over time, the financial rewards really do stack up as well if you're consistent with it and execute well. So thanks for listening. Hope you could. Reginald Ronald Rensell III. Talk soon, buddy.
Lose yourself.